Easy E, how are we?
Johnny, what's happening?
Nothing much. Smitey, how are we?
Just gonna
Smitey.
say it myself now. Why not?
Straight into it. We're 2 weeks into this new tradition and I like it. How are we getting
How
on?
big one of those?
Adding the Y's onto everything, adding that extra little things onto everything. Guys, I'm going to be a little bit selfish again this week because back in October, I got nothing short of the hairdryer treatments, probably the PC way or the PG way of saying it on the podcast from Eric. I was doing the Thoroughbred Marathon and I was around 3/4 of the way through. The legs had died. We talked about it before in a previous episode of the podcast. People want to go back to listen to it. And Eric was like, here, take this. And he literally forced a banana down my throat. Literally is very important in that sentence there. A banana.
I was like, where's he going? It's Friday and it's Saturday.
And the reason for it is because like he asked me what my nutrition was, and I was like, well, I had my Wittix this morning and my protein shake, and I had I think it was electrolyte drink I had beforehand. I was like, yeah, no, but what's your nutrition journey? I was like, well, I had a bottle of Lucozade to start in the 15k mark. I got another bottle of Lucozade, and then around 30k mark, I got another bottle of Lucozade because I hate the gels. And he's like, you're an idiot. He's like, your nutrition's absolutely shocking. So I've learned feck all since then. I have this event coming up. As we record, this is a Thursday afternoon, so you're probably thinking, geez, why is Sean all perky and, he's got a bit of energy and step to him? It's because I've not started my 4-4-48 challenge. And in terms of nutrition, I still have that box of Weetabix, the few electrolytes, step for it. But apart from that, I ain't got a whole lot else. But obviously, we're not going to focus this just on me and my particular runs. We're going to be talking about how to fuel your runs towards longer races and during races when you switch from the gels or the jelly babies to the solids. What is an electrolyte drink, or why would you have a protein drink instead of why would you carb load? Should you carb load? How much pasta do you need to have? Is too much going to mess with the other end of your system? All that literal shy talk right after we hit the intro music this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast. Let's go. Okay, I did a lot of talking during the intro, so I'm going to do my due diligence and shut the hell up right now because I like I said in the intro, I don't know a whole hell of a lot about. I know about nutrition and carbs and proteins and fats and all the rest, but in terms of the specifics on fueling and that kind of knowledge and the carb loading, I would normally preach each to their own. Try out a few things, find out what works, what doesn't work. But hopefully through this episode, we'll get people onto a fast track in terms of trying out what does and doesn't work and go from there. I suppose just as before we get to Eric, who'll be the main nutrition guy, Rachel, just for yourself, building towards the triathlons, different things you're doing. Have you changed your nutrition? Do you have nutrition between your swim to your cycle to your run? Like Eric talked before, like do you have bars sellotaped onto your bike or what's the story there?
Again, I think it depends on how long you're planning on being out for. I do definitely, just going back to what you said there, try. And I don't mean try as in triathlon. I mean, try out your nutrition before you hit the event. For me with sprint triathlons, no, I maybe would have an electrolyte in my water bottle on the bike, which I would try and drink a good bit of towards the start of the cycle. Again, right. We're talking about nutrition here, but you also need to think about your timing in nutrition. You don't want to be drinking those fluids right before you get off the bike, because then they're just, they can be floating around your stomach as you're running, which isn't very pleasant. So usually for sprint tries, it's just the electrolyte drink. For the Olympic triathlon, I'd usually have a gel or two stuck to not the handlebars. It's really genius. Okay. I wouldn't have been able to figure this out only someone did it for me. You tape them to the main bar on your bike in such a way that when you rip it, you're ripping the main part of the gel off and it's only the top that's attached to the bike. So it's like a clean break.
So it opens.
Yeah. So like imagine,
so you're actually about 10 thing off.
So with the gels, the way they come with like any sort of sachet has that little tear in it. Yeah. That's easy to open. So you just tape the top of that to the bike. So then when you grab your gel, you pull it and it tears. You're not trying to take both hands off the bike and try and steer and focus and open the gel and all this stuff going on. You just rip it, it's open, and you're on.
No matter what we talk about over the next 20, 30 minutes in this podcast, that is worth a listen just for that piece of advice alone, because that is up there with the what was it, the thumb holder with the running? Actually, I've forgotten already. Sugar. I was going to say some great bit of advice Rachel had in the podcast. Oh, the thumb holder with the watch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you know it comes from there without pulling back and stuff like that. That's up there. That is genius level. That is brilliant.
I know. I was very impressed with that one.
Going back to your gels, do they all have caffeine in it? Should they have do you have gels with caffeine in it or some without? And did you take one or the other, or does it make a difference? Do you know?
Again, it depends on how you react to caffeine. So for me, I could just take any gel. So gels tend to come, I mean, I don't know. Have you ever walked into the nutrition section of a sports store? Like, it's a minefield. Mm-hmm. There's so many different brands and so many different types. So like when you see a fat packet of gel versus a skinny packet of gel, they might actually have the same nutritional value. It's just one is watered down and one is more concentrated. And then you have the ones that have caffeine, the ones that don't. And then you have ones that might have additional sodium or things like that in them. And we haven't even started talking about the flavors yet. You can get a mojito flavored gel. And I think you can get a margarita flavored one as well. You know, get the party started before you hit the finish line.
And again, like caffeine, there is studies to say that a certain level of the amount of caffeine you're taking in can actually be a dehydrant as well. Like, you can dehydrate yourself a little bit more, but it's great for, I don't know, again, everyone is different. I know certain people who take on a bit of caffeine and the toilet needs to be within 10 minutes. So, but it can be great before the start of a workout. It definitely can give that energy boost. But long distance, I don't know if I'd be taking on a hell of a lot of caffeine. But again, like the doses that you'd want to be looking at, you know, for myself, 91 kilos, I could probably tolerate 270, 250, maybe 5 to 500 milligrams of coffee. Like they do say 3 to 6 milligrams of coffee per body weight. So I don't know, it depends on what kind of strength your coffee. Sean loves a good old strong coffee over there.
It's barely midday and I've got 4 cups of coffee in me already. I have to stop by 2 o'clock. I'm like, right, that's it, because I get the jitters and won't sleep at night. So the coffee would affect me different than someone like yourself who's not much of a coffee drinker. I have heard it'd be like 45 to 50 minutes before your workout and stuff to give it time to kick in, as opposed to while you're doing a warm up having a sip of coffee. You know, the warm up, your session could be halfway through, so before it kicks in. Right or wrong, you feel free to correct me on that one.
Yeah, and look,
fun fact, I drink coffee now, but occasionally, and I never ever drink energy drinks. But before some of my track races, and before some of, I think probably most of my PBs, I sat down with a Red Bull. And it's not something I would ever do. It's not something I would recommend. But I always struggled to get myself fired up before a race. I always really struggled with that whole, let's go, let's get it, that kind of, I'm ready for this attitude. And, you know, that can play into your warm-up. You're not getting your heart rate elevated enough. So I would never really drink the full one. But I chose the energy drink over the coffee just to give me that extra kick. So it does have that benefit. But I think the biggest benefit is if you want a good story and coffee doesn't agree with you and you take caffeine during an endurance race, you're probably going to have a great story to tell for the rest of your life. That's another benefit you have to think of.
That's no story I want to tell personally.
That's why we say try it out, because again, I don't drink much coffee nowadays before I race. I might not have any tea or coffee for the 2 days beforehand, and then have one maybe an hour before the race, so that you get that kick from the caffeine. Mm-hmm. Again, it could be purely mental. for someone who drinks it so little, I don't know how much of an effect it does have on me, but that's just a habit. Again, we did talk about rituals and stuff before.
Yeah.
Maybe that is just something I have in my head. If I don't have it for 2 or 3 days beforehand and then have it that morning, it'll give me a boost.
Yeah, and when you were talking there with the Red Bull before, that the first thing that came to my mind was the habit, the ritual of, okay, I had a can of Red Bull beforehand. Whether it worked or didn't, if you had a great race, you're more likely to have that kind of Red Bull again before the next race, because you're like, did this work? This set up, this lead in, the stretches I did, or whatever, the can of Red Bull, this routine, that got me going, that got me my PB. If I follow this exact same routine, it could happen again. But it was, I suppose to Eric, the gels, do they make much sense over a 5K or a smaller distance, or are we talking about just for endurance there on that one? And when does it change?
Yeah, so to be honest, if you're just going for an hour, what you have in your system will more than likely cover you. Like, it's like you don't really need to be replenishing. Definitely after the event, 100% you need to replenish. But for the likes of, say, a 10K, a gel, it's not really going to help you out. It might help with the aftermath of the recovery, all right. Of course, food at any point is going to help your recovery. Food is the most important part of recovery. But for me personally, and I think the studies will say that probably in durations of less than an hour, and I'd nearly argue it depends on how quick you're running a half marathon, but yeah, you could get away with a half marathon is what I'd say. And I do think you do need to think about definitely your water intake, your electrolyte intake. But yeah, just under the 2 hour mark, you could get away with it. And I say get away with it, that of course nutrition will always help. But if you didn't want to really try it and you just showed up on the day, 100% you'd get away with it. Would you take longer to recover? Yes, depending on what you eat directly after. But I'd be more so for the longer races, the longer triathlons. Like your Olympic triathlon could take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours as well, multiple sports. So, but I wouldn't say don't think about nutrition for a half marathon, but it is one that you could possibly get away with it. But anything over that, then you need to start taking on board. Like, gels are good. Like, depends on what's in them. Like carbs always good to have in gels. Like, they help with the water retention that we're going to take on. That's why we get it good. Like they say, if we're looking at over like activities lasting longer than 2 hours, you want to be taking on about 30 to 45 grams of carbs, 15 grams of proteins, and then get your electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and water. So if you're taking on that kind of ratio of carbs, proteins, water, you should be nicely balanced for the level of exercise that you're taking on. I know we had Edible Evidence on when we were talking about this before, and we were like, is there something you should be eating exactly? Nutritionally, she said, no, some people drank milk for the entire thing and it replaced the levels of carbs and proteins and electrolytes they need. It just depends on each individual. One person I remember, she was saying, could nearly eat a roast dinner and go cycling, and the other person
That's
couldn't.
me.
So yeah, so it depends on what you have. Like, it's like the multi-event kind of days, John, where we're doing Quest, or if Rachel's taking on some of the longer triathlons, like they're saying 60 grams of carbs to 15 grams of protein in the same amount of water. So obviously the longer you're going in that day, you need to be thinking about your carbs, one for energy, your proteins to help out the muscles, and then your electrolytes, sodium, potassium, because as we sweat, we're going to lose our salts, we're going to lose everything else with it. And if we're just taking on water, we don't get that fluid balance that we need. Electrolytes are basically the pieces of the system that help cells transfer energy, everything. Like they're just electrically charged, and that's why they're called electrolytes. If we're not replacing them, we find it hard the body finds it hard to do its normal routine, its normal function, its normal transfers. So that's why electrolytes are really good for replenishment. That's why it's essential to do it. We need them. We get them through foods, we get them through drinks. But when we're not eating and we're just taking on water and sweating and taking on water and sweating, we're going to start to kind of deplete ourselves of electrolytes, because there's only two ways we'll use them, is through urine and through sweat. So The more we sweat, the more we're going to lose, the more we'd want to replace. There's loads of ways to get them in. You can get them in through food. Like they do say your Lucozades and stuff do have your electrolytes in it, but they're basically just carrying in your sodiums and calciums and all that kind of stuff. So whatever has that element in it. And a lot of sports drinks, a lot of recovery drinks now are quite good at having a little mix in it that are quite high in these electrolytes. But it's there's a lot to think about when you're going into a race. Gels are great because those breakdowns I've just said, if you weren't writing them down, that's fine. We can post them in show notes. But like I wouldn't like to be 2 hours into my marathon and thinking, okay, how many peanuts do I eat for this to get this much carbs, and what protein do I need, and what to drink? So they do help you cheat a little, that you could possibly tell what's in each sachet. You could balance out. I know people that use different electrolyte sachets or gels. So this one will do this one will do this, and they squeeze them into water and shake them up themselves. So they kind of just use it as a cordial as such, with different electrolytes to make sure, depending on the event they're doing, that they're getting in. So there's lots of different ways to get it in. I prefer the jellies. I actually prefer chewing than the gels.
I was just going to say that for people who don't like gels, there are other options as well, because, when you're like, gels come in that liquid form. So when you're taking that in an event, it doesn't sit well with everybody. So there are other options out there and different ways of getting in your carbs, your proteins, things like that. So because, the electrolytes, as I said, are liquid form. The electrolytes are obviously mostly liquid form. Like you either dissolve your tablet in water, or else you have your Lucozade, things like that. But you can get more solid foods. Like Eric, you just mentioned the jellies there, but you can get also proper bars that people like to take on the runs.
Yeah.
And it's just up to you.
Yeah. So for me, like, you just have to think practical. So they're great, like I think they're called Be Kind or whatever they are. They're kind of nutty bars that they're quite good in proteins, the carbs and everything. But what I find when I'm running and I'm chewing like nuts, like I'd nearly choke eating peanuts and popcorn on my own watching telly, never mind if I'm trying to breathe. And I'm not very good at breathing through my nose. So I'm conscious that I'm breathing through my mouth as well. So the last thing I'd want to do is kind of be choking as I'm trying to munch on this. But I find when I'm on the bike, I have more capacity to eat these kind of things. So depending on the event, so when I'm on the bike here, what I practice doing when I'm on my cycles is I have the fruit and nut mix or trail mix. So I'm eating nuts. So I'm getting in my fats, I'm getting in proteins, I'm getting in carbs, and I'm just chomping away every so often, just getting used to eating while exercising. It's actually really hard to kind of practice and setting time. So I think last week I said, okay, every 15 minutes, I'm going to take on my water plus my little scoop of nuts and chew away and see how the body reacts over a 2-hour cycle. And you can actually tell, and I don't know if you've ever noticed, Sean, that point where you reach the wall and your body just starts craving the extra Lucozade. You kind of wish you had a gel. I know you definitely did it when we were on that marathon around Kildare. I was like, you're an idiot. But it does help to kind of find out when your body needs it, when it's going to need that energy supply. And I know a couple of the long distance runners in work before a marathon, they actually ran probably a half marathon around the route, and they were kind of like, yeah, I'd like a gel here. And they were laying their little refuel spots for themselves because it was self-sustained kind of marathon. So it is really important to understand yourself of when you're going to eat. For me, on the Ironman, I guarantee a stop that I'll be picking up, I'll be eating a peanut butter and jam sandwich, stuff that's moderately soft, white bread or whatever it is, but something that's food based. I'm not chewing a lot. I could nearly swallow whole if I wanted to. I'm going to be trying those things out. So it's very individual. Food is always individual, and everyone will always be different, but you need to be taking on the right amounts of balance, I suppose, is the way. Obviously carbs for energy, and the electrolytes to replenish what we've said. It helps fluid pass through the cell membrane. Like, it's the science of it is important, and how you fix it is relatively simple. Once you're doing it in a balance over the right amount of time. There's some people that don't sweat as much as I would sweat.
Yeah.
Sean, you nearly broke an iPhone from sweating a lot, which would probably mean you would need more electrolytes if you're sweating more. So it's, whereas someone else running beside you gets really red faced but doesn't sweat quite as much, so they're probably not. So Rachel doesn't really sweat. She's a freak. So
I still sweat, but like I do a warm up, and like this used to be at home as well, like in the cold. I do a warm up and my cheeks are just bright red. But I could run with my boyfriend, who I would consider a lot fitter than me, but he's sweating profusely and I'm not. And I would always have been like, oh my God, like, is this a sign that I'm really fit? Like, I'm not sweating as much, I'm not under as much pressure. But that has absolutely nothing to do with it. That's a misconception I always had, was, oh God, maybe I'm fitter than I think I am, because this is not taking as much out of me. My clothes aren't wringing wet. But it's just how your body, just how much your body excretes. And that is different. So you need to know that if you're a big sweater, you have to get those electrolytes in greater volumes than maybe me, who, yes, I sweat. I'm not I'm not someone who doesn't sweat at all. I still sweat a normal amount, let's say, but I wouldn't have to take in as much as someone who is bringing out their socks at the end of a run. And I've seen people do that. I've seen people who finish runs and literally wrang out their socks as if they just stepped out of water.
One, that's nasty. Two, you can't beat a fresh pair of socks after a long run. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it is great.
Is it individual then for the timing breakdown of having food, or do you reckon like is there a law of like every 90, not a law, but an unwritten rule, I suppose, like every 90 minutes or 15 minutes on every hour after a certain point? Is that a bit in some sort of guideline on that, or is it that a lot more individual?
Yeah,
let's say for long runs, for example.
There is guidelines on most of the gel packets. There is guidelines, and I know the High Five definitely say take the first one after 40 minutes and then every 20 minutes after that. That's their recommendation.
That's
so I don't know what that's based on. I'd assume they've done studies of people's intake. I always consider that a lot, especially if you're out for 3-4 hours of a marathon. Think of how many 40 an hour, like I think
it's good marketing on their behalf.
Yeah, but that's the point. Is it marketing then? Like, because you do have a lot of things like you definitely need this, or if you do a marathon, you will die without this. Like, and people are trying to sell products and stuff. I'm not putting on High Five one way or the other on that, but overall, like, is it? There's obviously going to be elements and stuff of that in there, but
I'm raging I don't have one to hand this week. Usually I'd have one or two for trial, but I've moved on to different kind of jellies. But I'd like to see the breakdown of what's in them. I can probably look them up in the background here while we're talking, but I'd say the reason they're doing that is the same thing I was saying to you, Sean, in terms of the amount of carbs, proteins, electrolytes that you need per hour. And like per hour it's a very relative statement. How often you take them in. Like, to take in that much food on the hour could be quite a lot when you're on a run. Like, so
Agreed.
That's probably, and I say probably because I haven't got one to hand. I don't know what it's in, but I'm guessing if we were doing like intense multi-sport activities, taking one every 20 minutes is probably going to add up to that 60 grams of carbs and the 15 grams of protein, and it'll give the electrolytes. So if we're just sipping 600 mils of water over an hour, we have met the balance that studies will kind of say you need for the longer sports. But again, for me, I would like to go every 5K, 25 minutes. I need to have eaten this, or, like every 3K, I'm going to take in 4 sips of water. Make sure then on the 5th K, I have my gel. So 25 minutes. So there's 20 minutes ish.
And that's before feeling you need it, as in 100%. Need it, because it's going to take a while to kick in. Otherwise, it is a case of if you're really needing it, you've waited too long, and this is not going to be a race.
Yeah, you've missed the point where if your body starts feeling you need it, you've nearly gone too far. It's going to take a lot more to replenish your body. Instead of giving it a bit extra fuel, you're now looking at replenishing a lot more.
And it'll make sense. And that's where the cramps and stuff keep in, where, you know, like that's, your body is going to tell you that it's too late. And then it's just mind power. You know, and that's when the muscles start seizing a little bit more. The muscles are starting to break themselves down then, you know. So there is elements of that you do need to be replenishing all the time as well. Like, and we do use fat for energy. Like when you're doing long distance training, your body is gonna, especially if you're keeping your heart rate low and you're keeping that in the aerobic range. That's the important thing. It's your go all day range essentially. Your body will get very efficient at burning fat for energy, but that equally can catch up if you're not replacing the other basics that helps your body function, you know, like, and getting that food in. So yeah, it is relative, but definitely those guidelines. And as I said, like every hour is a relative statement, but I would, in the first 5K of a marathon, I'd already be eating. I'd 100%.
In the first 5K of a marathon?
Yeah. I'd have started eating at that stage, because as you said, so I'd hit my 5K and I'd take my gel or my jelly and my water and because I'd already be sweating. So I need to have my water. I need to start thinking about electrolytes. And then I'm eating in the first half hour to help the hour later. So I don't want to let myself deplete the stocks and then in the last 10K, it's at that point where, you know, so the last 10K is going to take me an hour. Is the food I take now going to get me across the line or help with Henry? You get into that zone of whatever you do in the last 40 minutes, not really going to help you. It'll help your recovery, 100% help your recovery to keep fluids coming on, to keep everything. But to get into that zone of, okay, whatever I have on me now will get me across the line. So that's why I think it's important early on, especially, you know, just little mind games, like every time you crest a big hill, okay, water, food, breathe, relax, settle, and then get back into it again. And just keep yourself going in that rhythm. By every aid station, I think they're every 8 kilometers or something, you know, you'd want to have taken on at least a full bottle of water at that stage and moving on, depending on how much you're sweating and how you're feeling and how it reacts with you, of course.
You must be relying a lot on the aid stations, because otherwise, like, I'm a big advocate of bringing back the fanny packs from the 90s, because it sounds like you have a lot of gels and stuff in you to try and keep going on these marathons. Like, because that's a lot of extra. Or am I overstating how heavy these things weigh in terms of, like, you know, you've actually only got 3-4 in a pocket, you're not even feeling it from the get go, or
yeah, well, if each pack is 10 grams, you know, like 10 packets is 100 grams. Are you really going to notice that's still less weight than your phone, you know? So it's, you know, it brings you down the road of buying the endurance bags now that I see a lot of people wearing, with a big water thing on the back and the big things. But if you're going to do a self-sustaining marathon, then yes, it is important to probably maybe pick up something like that. Like the bike is great. The Ironmans are great because I can tape it to the bike, as Rachel has said. I can tape everything to the bike. And we spoke about cycling last week and how weight is important, but am I going to cry about the 20 gels that are sticking off my bike for the race? Absolutely not. So the aid stations are fantastic, but they might not necessarily carry the fuel that suits you. And that's where you just have to make the decision of what's really good for me. So Sean, you run with a large bottle of Lucozade, and that's it. So it's
and my phone in the other hand, which I no longer can do, because to go back to your point earlier, I didn't nearly break the iPhone. I broke that iPhone. My bank balance today, I broke that iPhone.
And now, in fairness to you, whether you like it or not, in your head, Lucozade is all you need. So you will continue with the Lucozade. You will always, you feel like, no, that's what I need. Because even when you've done your own self-sustaining, you've gone in, you've had your Lucozade, you've taken your break, and you've got on. But when we look at your 4x48, for example, which is a great example to look at, because it's a really funny event in the sense that it's only 4 miles, it's only 6.5 kilometers. So you wouldn't fuel for it, you wouldn't fuel during it. So what's going to be really important for you is your fuel before, your fuel after. and then your rest and recovery in between. So most of us will go do a 10K, we'll come back, relax, shower, and then start to feel ourselves again, and then probably go to bed or do whatever we're going to do, and then you're going to do the process again. So for me, doing your races or your runs, is there a point in you fueling in the 40 minutes you're doing it? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. The second you finish, that's important time for you then, because you've a limited time to let those carbs digest. You've limited time to get feeling comfortable that you can take on enough food to recover and be ready for the next run. So for you, you'd look at certain things. So for short distances, you like protein is easily digested. So we'll probably take on protein just before you get on the run, maybe with some granola, a banana. You don't like bananas, we'll find other fruit. So you'll have like your yogurt. Obviously, the more liquidy it is, the easier it's going to digest. Proteins go first, fats second, carbs third. So we'll have a small snack, probably 15 minutes just before you run. See how you feel on the first one. Then if you don't like it, 20 minutes before it. But it'll mean you'll give yourself good fuel just before you go on your run. You'll fuel for your run, nice and easy pace, keep your heart rate low. And then straight afterwards, that's where you need to start getting into the complex foods, the carby foods that are going to take longer to digest. And then hopefully that cycle will reset itself by the time you come around. Sleep deprivation is the next thing that's going to kill you. So obviously the longer you're awake, the more carbs you need. You're not actually resting heart rate. You're still up at the 110s, 120s, 130s. And then the more tired you get, the more food cravings you have. And that's where you need to be balanced in the dairy milk is not necessarily going to help you complete the event. Even though you're just going to crave sugary things, you're going to crave everything. So when you're looking at an event specific like that, we haven't mentioned the gel once. And that's the important thing. And that's a long period of time. You're 48 hours essentially resting, recovering, competing, resting, recovering, competing. So it's a really, really long battle. And that's where we're going to look at a couple of food things for you. I know you're useless in the kitchen, so it's all right. I'll make a pasta bake for you, and I'll make a few other things and get a few combinations to put together. And you're going to try it, and you're going to see how your body feels at different times. But again, with self-sustaining, weight is important. Like, no one wants to be carrying 10 sandwiches on a marathon. That's why the gels are convenient. That's why they do so well. The unfortunate thing is people don't know what they're doing. They just buy into it and they're like, oh, eat 10 gels, and I don't know why I did that. So
it's the meathead mentality, like what you were talking about earlier. Is and I say that as in, like, I'm guilty. Like the legs start feeling sore, and you're like, well, one of these is supposed to help me a little bit. Imagine what 3 is going to do. The 3 of them, I have one go, and I'm going to be flying. You guys can not say correct me, because I know I'm wrong on that, but you would be thinking, oh man, 1, I'm struggling, but 3, let's go. It's like, I'm wake up real tired one morning. Let's have 2 cups of coffee and let's go. Even though you could argue where you should have coffee first thing in the morning and wait 2-3 hours. That's probably a different discussion in itself. But like that would be the perception, is just more the better. But then again, too much.
Yeah, you're gonna learn it. Like, they are quite sweet, and I think, it's kind of helpful that they are. They're quite, when they're in your mouth, you're kind of that kind of feeling, which kind of I think is good, because it kind of you don't really want to put 3 of them in there.
Yeah, it really puts you off, because when you start getting tired, yes, you crave like sweet things, but that real intense, sugary, fruity, like, it can be a bit much.
It's drinking like Ribena straight. It's intense. It is a highly concentrated sugars, carbs, everything. So it is. It's very tasty. But everything depends. Everything depends. Some people won't be able for the gels. Some people will try jellies. Some people will pick up fruit. The Dublin Marathon is great because you can be running through anywhere in Dublin, and there's going to be someone giving you a packet of Haribo. It's still giving you in the carbohydrates through sugars. Like, it's whatever you like. If you like fruit pastilles, maybe carry them in your pocket. There's the important thing is you look at the back of something and you find out how much carbs is in it, much protein is in it, and how often I need to take. And once you balance that out, whatever you enjoy is definitely really good. Because I know one of the ultra runners in here, he just loves jelly beans, and he nearly fought with a lot of people over jelly beans. So they misheard him and gave him jelly babies, but he meant jelly beans. as he was
That's a
whatever.
big difference.
No, but mentally, when he was 70 kilometers in and he wanted jelly beans and they gave him jelly babies, he nearly shot someone. So because so
just had that image.
Yeah,
jelly babies.
Yeah,
just throwing them at him.
Nearly threw them back at them. And it's. Well, my point is, it's mentally. Although the nutrition is good, the nutrition can be through a drip. You can put in the nutrition through a drip. It's whatever makes you feel good, whatever makes you feel like you are optimized performance. And as Rachel said, the Red Bull before. Now, I think they have limited the amount of caffeine in Red Bull you can have before an Olympic race, or else it's considered doping. So there's probably an element to that as well. But it's like whatever makes you have that confidence is the most important. For me, the nuts when I'm running, it's very hard to eat. So I don't have confidence in eating them. So I will take on the jellies, or I will take on the gels, or I will have little protein balls or something that's chocolatey that I'll just slowly just melt in my mouth. So you can use it in any combination. It's just everything just depends on you and your preferences. So yeah, but you're very bad at it. You don't eat at all. You're just full Rambo with your Lucozade and off you go, and that's it. So even that banana, although you didn't hate it, was definitely way too late, but probably helped your recovery afterwards.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when Eric's coming at me about that, one, I know, but two, I'm not saying I am right by any which way or anything like that. It's like I know I just have the Lucozade and get and go, because as lazy as it sounds, I know I'm running the marathon, whatever, but the effort of having all the packets with me and figuring out the right ones and nutrition time and all the rest. But having said that, had I done that right, I probably could have knocked 5-10 minutes off my time easily. But to do a full circle on this podcast, because you just touched on it there, why the banana?
Well, it's a good source of carbs, and I knew you hadn't got any in you.
And it's easy to digest, compared to chewing an apple or things like that. A banana is so easy to just get into your body. It slides in.
If you think about how easy it is to open a banana, it's very easy to chew. It's not going to take up much energy to chew it, swallow it, and then you're not throwing a dirty wrapper on the ground. You're throwing a banana peel that's going to degrade over time into a ditch, and that's why 2 or 3 bananas is better than carrying the gels. Someone doesn't have to clean up after you essentially as well, and you're getting in a nutrient dense piece of fruit essentially as well. You're replenishing a lot of nutrients in there. But for me, it was just the ease of the banana, especially when you're tired. Like when people are dehydrated, tired, even becoming hypothermic, you get lazy. Your body doesn't want to do any other functions that will use energy, and that's why you're like, I don't want to eat food. I'm just going to trundle along with my Lucozade, thanks. But it's forcing yourself to tell your body you need this, or we are going to struggle more. So yeah, the banana, the why is the easy. It's very easy to dispose of. It's very easy to take a couple of bites. And everyone knows how brown bananas go quite quickly. It'll turn to compost very quick. So, you're not hindering the environment with your nutrition. You just compare it to popcorn or the nut bar. Like, which would you rather try and eat while you're breathing heavy? So, yeah, that's the reason why. And I had one with me, so.
No, I'm sure people.
We've been having a different conversation if he'd had a Snickers or something in his pocket.
Oh, because when you do finish races and stuff, like the most common fruit I would see different races would be your banana and stuff at the end. So I'm sure there might be other people listening and they hear about banana, maybe it's potassium, whatever it is. They're like, what's the reason for the banana over an apple or a pear or an orange or anything like that? And that was pretty cool answers, guys. Before we wrap up this episode of the podcast, is there anything in terms of fueling our runs or fueling our triathlons that you feel we have not hit on yet? And I'm not talking about hydration afterwards in terms of a couple of beers. It's very important to me.
Just don't be lazy with it, because it will have an effect, especially recovery.
That feels like a personal attack on me.
If you're not going to wake up and just run a marathon randomly. Well, most people don't anyway. It's like, you're doing it on this day. Know exactly what you're doing for food afterwards. like most people will have booked into maybe a restaurant, especially if you're up in town or something, like after the Dublin Marathon. Or if you're coming home, have something made the day before so that you don't have to go home and cook.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're probably not best going to a chipper.
The other thing is, well, I can go full tilt with it.
You feel like crap after a chipper anyway, let alone after doing a marathon and then that as well. That's to me, that's like, don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with a chipper, but no.
The other one is, and I was actually quite surprised because a lot of the people will say before a race on carb loading.
Yes.
And for us, the first time we did a marathon, Sean, that was wedges and lasagna the night before, like a pair of geniuses.
I wasn't even good lasagna wedges either. Let's call a spade a shovel on it.
Septic. But I got a fright when I was looking at how much carb. So carb loading is known out there. It is known out there for the longer distance athletes of, you know, what you actually need to put into your carbs wise. And I think it's nearly 900 grams of carbs. Now, you have to, they put a 4-day window on it, or the research is kind of saying that there's a 4-day window on it. Personally, I'd be 2 to 3 days at max, because that's a lot of food. It's nearly 3,000 calories in carbs in the build up to a race. But they say it can help maintain those energy sources, but they do put a window on it, and they do come with a lot of, listen, this is a very limited time only kind of procedure before long. It's kind of like, I don't like to draw a comparison, but boxers making weight by messing with their fluid balance in the lead up. It's not a very sustainable thing, but it gets them there. Not the same thing at all, but in a comparison of something that's very short duration, can be messed up if you don't do it right, and can probably hinder events. So yeah, but I was very surprised that in the build up, 3,000 plus calories of carbohydrates in the.
That is a lot of pasta.
So it is a lot of pasta. It's a lot.
When you hear people talking about carb loading, I suppose they think, you know what? Instead of a meat and veg and potatoes kind of dinner tonight, I'm going to have a plate of pasta. But the way you're talking about, you're not even scratching the surface in terms of how much carbs you should be having. That to me, that's insane. I'm not saying it's bad or it's
beforehand. It's not just the night before. You have to be doing it for 2, 3, even the 4 days beforehand.
Yeah, like for me, I don't think I'd be able to do it, because that is a lot of eating.
That's overhauling diets in 2-3 days before a big race. That seems.
Yeah. Now,
I'm sure people do it and it works for them.
I'm not going to lie though, coming up to the Ironman, I probably will do it. I probably will. Just to see, like, what's the point in seeing this kind of, tactic? It is a tactic. It has been proved, but
proven work. Yeah.
I'm gonna give it a go, and maybe I won't be hitting the 900, but definitely I'll increase it to 4, maybe, which would be probably double. Like my intake is supposed to be, especially with the 12 hours of training a week, is supposed to be 200 to 300 grams of protein, protein and carbs. So 200 to 300 grams a day. So doubling that in the build up, I think would be enough for my body to go, yes, you have plenty of stores. Because it'll be used to the 300, and then all of a sudden it's doubled. So for me, I think that'll be a good initial tactic for me. But yeah, I just got a little bit of a fright when I read that some athletes are taking in 900 grams a couple of days before.
Obviously, endurance athletes, you're not going to do this for your 5K.
Absolutely not. No.
Waddle around. Yeah, I just don't know how my body would cope with that amount of carbs.
Yeah, but again, when you go the long distances, it's like the Ironman, like that's a long day. It's a long day, and I can understand. Why you'd put that kind of fuel in anticipation for 12 hours of hard exercise. So it's well, I suppose Sean will find out. Sean will be taking in probably that level of carbs over the course of 24 hours at least. So, because he's going to be awake during the night, he has extra time to eat, so it's going to be easier to take it in. But we'll see how he gets on. Anyway, big day on him come Monday.
That's a story for next week's podcast, I suppose. And on that note, if anyone's got anything else to add on fueling your runs this week?
No, I think we've covered it.
Brilliant. On that note, I'm going to have 900 grams of lasagna right now.
I've done it once. Wouldn't recommend it.
No, neither would I. And that is pretty much it from this week's episode of the Any Given Monday podcast from myself, Smitey, and Lawless. Don't know why I said Lawless. I never say Lawless. From Eric.
Sorry.
Take care.
Bye.
Banana bye.